Hey guys, welcome to RC Video Reviews. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a setup template for the Nexus flybarless unit using Rotorflight. So the technique applies for Rotorflight. You can use this on any flybarless. I use Nexus. That's my poison of choice at this point. So I'm going to show you the idea behind a template is that whenever you set up a new model, there are certain repetitive tasks that you have to do, like setting up your receiver, setting up your protocols, setting up your rates, your profiles, your modes, all these things that you have to kind of go through. But once you've done it once, it's really, really easy to take a configuration file and do a little bit of editing and wind up with a really good template that whenever you do another setup, you simply paste that template in and all kinds of activities are done for you right away, like your entire radio setup, for example. The other thing I'm going to do is kind of subdivide this a little bit and talk about PIDs, because that's another area where I don't really want to get into a debate on the virtues of using PIDs from one platform to another, or even from one size helicopter to another, because the reality is there are a great deal of potential disagreements that could come up in that space. But if there is, so in my case, I'll just use the example. I've got two 420 class helicopters. In my mind, the PIDs for those should be almost identical. Now, maybe one's got different blades or different motor speed or different tail authority because the blade's a little taller or a little shorter. You know, those things will all come into a play. So it may not be exactly perfect. You know, there could be some subtle variances, but once you get a really good PID setup, it should kind of work across the board. Now you might have to change your gains a little or, you know, do a little additional tuning, but overall, once you get your PIDs worked out, they should be suitable across a wide range of airframes. So I'm going to show you, regardless of your philosophy on using PIDs from one airframe to another, I'm going to show you how to do it anyway. And I'll tell you one perfectly reasonable example of that is if I've got a Comp 420 and you've got a Comp 420 and you like the way mine flies, there's no reason you shouldn't use my PIDs, right? That should be a perfectly reasonable thing to do. So with that in mind, I'm going to start out by telling you, I spent last weekend tuning this Comp 420 and I think it flies fantastic. It had zero bad behavior. So I really like the PIDs. I like everything that I have on this setup. So I'm going to use this raw 420 not only as my template, but also as my PID profile template. So we're going to start by going into Rotorflight, and I've already got this configured, of course. I'm just going to move the helicopter out of the way because I need to be able to reach the keyboard. But I just wanted you to see it is plugged in to this raw 420. Okay. So I'm going to move that out of the way and now I can type. I'll bring my keyboard in the view here, and on the screen, I'm just going to type diff all. That's the command. All right. Diff all. DIFF space all. And after you do that, then you want to save it to a file. So I'm going to save mine to my desktop. And I'm going to call it my template scratch file. I don't really want to use this in production. I'm just going to call it my template scratch file. All right. And that's all we need at the moment for Rotorflight. That's all we need. So next, I'm going to grab that file that I just made, and that is sitting here on my desktop. So I'm going to open that up in a text editor. You can use any text editor you want. It really doesn't matter. Just use any text editor. And this is where the fun starts. So in order to create a template, the first thing we have to do is pay attention to things that you don't want to repeat from one model airframe to another. So for example, geometry would be a good example of that. We don't want to include like the pitch deltas, or the pitch scale from one to the other, the total blade travel limits from one to the other. Those you need to tune in geometry. And I have a geometry video showing you how to walk through that. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure we don't copy things like geometry. You also want to pay very close attention to things like cell count. If you have a battery, you know, if you're going from a 12S system to a 6S system, you might not want to include the cell specification. So in other words, you have to key that in manually in order for it to work. And same thing with head speeds. You definitely don't necessarily want the head speed that you have on a small heli spinning up a 700 class at the same, you know, rate. So those are things we're going to look out for. So the rule of thumb as we look through this configuration is we're going to delete things that we definitely don't want to use on a global basis. That's the idea. We're going to save things that we do want to look for on a global basis. So up top, we'll start at the top of this file, and we're just going to leave all these commands alone up top. We're not going to fiddle with those. The board name, Nexus F7, the board design, F7A1. If you don't know what they are, you should leave those alone. But now we start getting into the features, and you can see this one says name raw 420. I'm going to just change that name real quick to template, so there's no confusion. And then this is where the radio settings come into place. So you can see I've got feature, RX serial, telemetry, governor, ESC sensor, frequency sensor, and RPM filter. That's something I generally want to repeat because I believe those are connected directly to the UARTs, but at any rate, those are features that I want to have. So I'll leave those alone. And then the serial configuration right here, we've got serial, this is the UART configuration, serial 1 and 3. So we're going to leave those on as well. And what that does is in Rotorflight, when I bring Rotorflight up, that is going to go to, I have to hit exit and it's going to reboot me real quick, but that will go to the setup features right here, serial ports. So see how I have my S-bus set for ESC telemetry? That's what this is doing. This is setting that ESC telemetry. Okay, so there you go. That's the idea. We leave things that we want to reuse configured. We'll delete things that we don't. Servos. This is a good one. Now, in this example, you can see servo 4 is set for 780, 350, 350, 250, and 250, and 560. So this one is actually pretty close. Like this servo mix is not bad, except I don't want 780. I want 760 because 760 is the center. I don't want 780. That 780 indicates to me I moved my yaw servo to get it to be perfectly straight up and down. That's what that was. Mixer input, I definitely would take that out. You definitely don't want to configure your mixer. Definitely not. Servo, I'm only leaving these in because these are basically the defaults. If you have something other than the default, that's the one you have to leave in. But if they're defaults, you could also take them out. So in this case, notice there is a little difference here on the end that might be reversing. And since I'm not sure, I'm going to take it out. If I don't know exactly what it does, I'm going to take it out. So that one's gone on the servos, okay? But this one, I know servo 4 is the yaw servo, and I know I'm always going to have a narrowband servo. If you're not using narrowband servos, you wouldn't want to have this configuration in there either. So that's something I'll want to have. All right, my control map, AECR 123, I'm going to leave that in place. My auxiliary configuration, I'm going to leave in place. And my function adjustments, I'm going to leave in place. Those are all things that go on inside Rotorflight that match up with my radio settings. So those all stay. Now we're getting into the master, and this is definitely an area where we're going to need to pay attention. And I'm just going to go right down here to motor poles. So everything up front, these are all configurations related to the gyro and the black box. Oh, there's the accelerometer calibration. You probably should take that out. We're going to take that out. I know that the dynamic notch, these are all commands that go along with the gyro setup, so I'm going to leave that alone. My serial RX provider, CRSF, that's why I don't have to configure it every time I start up a Nexus configuration. I just paste this in. These are all black box commands. That's how I want my black box set up. Minimum throttle. This one has 1004. I'm going to take that out because that is a specific one to this particular helicopter. So I'll take that out. Motor poles, we're going to take that out. And the gear ratios, we're going to take that out as well. We don't need the gear ratios. I'm having a hard time highlighting here for some reason. There go motor poles. We'll take those out. And then let's see, VBAT min cell voltage 3.4. I'd leave that in because that's a common number that I would always use. My VBAT warning cell voltage 3.6, that's common. I wouldn't want to change that. My battery and current meter, I want those coming from the ESC usually. If you have something different, you might want to change that. Here's that cell count I told you. Take that out because if you leave that for 6 and you're flying 12, then you're going to have this weird behavior in the Rotorflight configurator up top. Tail center trim, that's definitely not good. Roll trim, pitch limit, geocorrection, all those relate to geometry. Those need to come out. Take those out. Take the defaults from Rotorflight. That will always be safer. Okay, they'll always be safe. The governor mode, spool up time, tracking time, auto rotation. These are all my auto rotation settings. I would definitely keep those in place. I don't want to change those. And then let's see, the governor RPM filter I'll leave. RC deflection 512, we're going to leave that alone because these are related to how I set up my throttle to get that auto rotation bailout option that I use. Deadband is common, yaw deadband is common. Here are my telemetry reuse commands. So I'm going to leave those in because that gives me my CPU load, my head speed, and my ESC temperature via reuse. So I'm going to keep those. Telemetry, enable pitch roll. All these telemetry commands we'll leave alone. The sensor protocol, this might change depending. So in my case, I use ZTW in this case, but I don't always use ZTW. So I'm going to take that out. It's not global. And then I've got gyro RPM filters. I'm going to leave those all in place. And then the name I'm going to set as, I'm just going to set it as something basic because I don't want this, I don't want everything I configured to be raw, or you could just take it out. That's probably the better option. That way it'll stay blank. Now here's the cool part. This is the PIDs part. And this one's super important because this one allows you to take your PIDs and share them from one helicopter to another. This is a super important piece. Profile 0, this is where I set my gains. And you can see just by looking at the commands what's going on here. This is pitch P, I like 60. Pitch I use 180. Pitch D, I use 60. Feed forward 137 and boost 35. So I'm not going to read every one of these, but these are my PIDs that I use for profile 0. And notice the governor head speed that's down here. I'm going to take that out because I want to make sure that I set that every single time. But all my other parameters for a profile are listed right there. So if I want to go ahead and share a PID setup from one helicopter to another, this is all I need to do is grab, and it depends on how many idle ups you have. In my case, I have 3 idle ups. So I'd be looking for profile 0, profile 1, and profile 2. Okay, that means those equate to my, in the Rotorflight, let me show you exactly what I'm showing you, what I'm talking about here. Those equate to these tabs, profile 1, profile 2, and profile 3, which is where we set our PIDs and things like our head speed right down here. Okay, so you can grab those and save those in your template. But what's more important, you can also just grab these commands and paste them into a helicopter. And I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. So there are my profiles, profile 1, 2, and 3. And then notice profile 3, 4, and 5 are empty. We don't need those. So I'm just going to take those out. There's no profile 3, 4, 5 settings in my template, so I'm going to remove those. And then I also have rate profiles. Let me correlate that for you. Rate profiles go here. So in the rate profiles, these determine things like your rate of rotation. That's what we're configuring here. Remember, this is a fly-by-wire system, so we configure our rate of rotation using RaceFlight. There are a couple of other options too. You can use Betaflight, KISS, Actual, whatever. There's other options. I'm using RaceFlight right now. I basically just set the rate of rotation based on bank 1, bank 2, and bank 3. So you notice that they creep up just a little bit depending. So I've got, say, for roll 240 here. On this one, I've got 260 and slightly more collective. And then on bank 3, I've got 13 degrees and 280. So that's kind of where we're controlling our rates in that rate profile section. All right, and that refers to these sections right here. So rate profile 0 in Rotorflight, it equates to rate profile 1. Don't ask me why. I don't know. It's a developer thing. It seems to me that they should align these things. Rate profile 1 should equate to rate profile 1 in the configuration, but that's not how it works. They are offset by 1. So kind of screwy. It's the way developers are. It's how they roll. So anyway, if you want to copy rates from one helicopter to another, you can grab this set of commands. So that brings us down to the bottom. I'm not making any changes, rate profiles 3, 4, or 5, so I'm going to delete those. And then the last command down here at the bottom is 6, is save. So that's it. Now I can save this. I can hit save. I'll hit duplicate, so I don't want to erase my first one. And I'm going to call this my Rotorflight. We'll call it the Rotorflight base config. Okay, so now you've got your base config. How about that? Now you've got your Rotorflight base config, and you can utilize this Rotorflight base configuration on every model that you set up. So all that's in here are the configuration parameters I use to set up my features, my serial ports, my tail servo, my controls, my profile controls, my idle ups and PID selectors, my PID selector tool, and then master commands that I will be using across all of my configurations, and then finally the PIDs. Okay, now let's put this into practice. So I'm going to show you why this matters. I'm going to disconnect. Let me bring the put the keyboard away. I'm going to bring the helicopter in real quick, and I'm just going to disconnect the comp 420. That's the one I used for the example. And then I'm going to bring in my M4 Max. And the reason I'm going to bring in the M4 Max is because I want my PIDs from my comp 420. Now I want them on my M4 Max. Okay, I accidentally bumped the keyboard here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the Rotorflight computer to USB. So there we go. I've connected that. And in Rotorflight, we're going to go into the CLI, and I'm going to just set this over to the side. Now, I'm going to turn the camera off on the desk because you don't really need to see that anymore. I just brought the M4 Max and connected it. Okay, so I'm just going to set that off to the side because it really just doesn't need to be in the camera now for what we're about to do. And now what I want to do is grab certain things out of my base config that I want to use in my M4 Max. Namely, I'm after the PIDs because the M4 Max has already been set up. I don't need to do a full setup. And also, all you have to do that is start and figure out which PIDs you want. In my case, I want all of them. I want all the PIDs because all the PIDs that I set up on the comp 420 are working well for me. So I'm going to start with profile 0, and I'm just going to grab that section just like this, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it into the CLI. So we hit paste, and then we'll hit enter. And all I'm doing when I do that is before I hit save, I'm just looking for errors. I want to make sure there are no errors, and I don't see any, no red, so it looks okay. So that looks like it's fine. And then, by the way, this command, when you see profile 1, all that's doing is telling Rotorflight that we're configuring profile 1. So it kind of switches into profile 1 and lets us configure it. So that's why that command is there. So now we'll do the same thing for profile 1. And since I know there's no errors, I'm going to go ahead and grab profile 2. So when I do that, we'll right click and hit copy, and then I'll right click and hit paste. And when I paste that in, that sets my PIDs for the M4 Max, the same as I had them set up on my comp 420. I do need to go back and check my head speeds because I just see that I pasted my head speeds in from my comp 420. That may not be what I want for my Max. So I'll look at my Max original configuration. But that's another thing to consider, right, is whether or not you want to change those head speeds. Okay, so keep that in mind. Just pay attention to your head speeds. And then all you do is type the word save and hit return. And when you do that, now you can go back to profiles and you can see that these profiles basically match up with what I have on my comp 420. And we'll just verify that. I'll bring these two up side by side and we'll validate a little bit. My pitch P gain is 60. I can see that right here. My pitch I gain is 180 and my pitch D gain is set pitch D gain. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong command. It's 60. Here it is. Pitch D gain right there. So sorry, 60, 180, and 60. That's correct. Now we'll look at roll. So they're out of order. That's what threw me. Pitch is first here, but it's second here. It's on the second row. That's what threw me. Okay, so now we'll look at roll. So we're looking at roll, and on roll, we've got 60, 180, 30, 135 for feed forward and 10 for boost. So yeah, that looks accurate. And then finally, we'll look at yaw really quickly. And for yaw, I've got 100. I gain 2. Interesting. This says yaw, I gain. Am I on yaw? 255 and 250. That looks like a mismatch. That's interesting that didn't take. Let's see. Profile. Oh, I'm on the wrong profile. That's terrible. I was on the wrong profile. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Well, let's do it right. Let's do it right. So pitch P, we'll start over. Pitch P, we got 60, 180, and 60, 137, 35. Got it. Let's do roll now. Sorry about that, guys. live, can't edit that. Roll, P gain is 60, 180, 30, 135, and 10. I see it. And then yaw, hopefully it will be right this time. Yaw is 100, 255, 50, 41 on F, that's out of order. And then B is 30. So that looks good to me. And then we can just really quick, I didn't set the head speed on this one. That I took that out of the profile on profile 0. But on profile 1, I did set the head speed to 2950. So we can check that really quickly just by scrolling down and verifying that we did set the head speed at 2950. So there it is. There you go. Real simple way to copy your, first off, to create a template. I highly encourage you to create a template. I can't even tell you how helpful that is all by itself. Creating a template just makes your initial Rotorflight configuration so much easier, because you basically just paste it in. You create this template, and on the configurator, you can go into the CLI and load it from a file and navigate directly to your base config and then hit open. That'll put it in your CLI and you can hit execute. So it's really easy just to load the whole file in and run it and set up your parameters. No problem to do that. But if you'd rather, you can also get section by section. So if you just want to do PIDs, for example, just make sure you grab that profile 0 and set the right profile and then copy. All you got to do is copy that, and then you can paste that into the CLI as well. So super easy to do. And then there you go. You can copy your settings from one Rotorflight fly barless unit to another, no problem. And you can share with your friends. Hey, if you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when new videos hit the channel. That's all I've got for today. Take it easy. Go fly something.